This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Project, so business casing and governance, all for this reason of delivering value. Does that make some sense? Okay. Now, to help me work out how to pitch this a little bit, can I just get a bit of a straw poll here from the group in terms of how many people have been involved in some form or another in a project to date in their career or in their studies? And anyone been involved in a project? So about half, okay. How many of those that have been involved in a project have been involved in a project all the way through its life cycle, from start all the way through to finish? Couple, okay, all right, okay. Any of you currently involved in a piece of work, in a project? Okay, a few. All right, okay, that just helps me work out where to pitch this a little bit. So let's just get into this context thing. Now, I'm going to start with this broader organisational context and then we'll work our way down, okay? And the reasoning for this is because projects don't operate in a vacuum. The reason for asking who's been involved in projects is because if you've been involved in a project, you'll probably have this sense that projects don't operate standalone. They don't operate in this vacuum where everything's perfect, where they can just decide what to do, they can get perfect resources, money's available, there's no other interruptions, no other interference. So, and whereas the reality is, if you've operated in a project all the way through, part way through, in some capacity or another, you know there's lots of other factors. Now, one of the key ones that's influencing projects, and will continue to do so, is at the macro level, is the shaping of what is a project in the first place and what's driving the need for projects. Now, when we look back in history, projects emerged not because someone sat round one day and said, I'm going to start a project. That's not the way it happened. I mean, Emerson didn't sit there with, or Benjamin Franklin or whoever else. They didn't sit there one morning and say, I'm going to do a project. No, they said, I'm going to do an experiment, or I'm going to change something. I'm going to create some new service. I'm going to innovate. I'm going to try and do something a bit different, whether it be create the light bulb, Alexander Bell, working out how to sort of get voice to go down a telephone line, etc., etc. They didn't start off saying, I'm going to run a project to do that. They were experimenting. They were trialling something. And they were doing it for a reason, for a benefit, whether it be an altruistic one to help people communicate and be better informed around the world, or whether to make a heap of money. But either way, they were doing it for a reason. So in the industrial era, doing these projects, they didn't sit there and say, as I said, I'm going to do a project, I'm going to get out the project management guide, I'm going to get out the toolkit, I'm going to break out Microsoft Project or Excel or whatever else the tools. They didn't have those tools. So it was very much informal project management. It was more experimental, just business sense they applied. Over the industrial generations, we get to a point where we started introducing, particularly post-World War II, some standards. People said, we're doing a lot more change, particularly off the back of during World War II and then post-World War II, big industrial sort of revolution growth. People started to say, oh, we're doing a lot of change. How do we put some shape around this and drive things out a bit more consistently? And so you sort of got the emergence of the early project standards and project toolkits. And then the last probably sort of 30 or 40 years in particular, so from the 1980s really sort of about today, you very much saw what I call Industry 3, which is starting to really use computing power, electronics, automation, leadership decision management tools, etc., and leadership thinking to really start to drive the fact this projects thing, it's not just something you do in the back shed anymore, it's now becoming a core part of what organisations do. Because if you think about what organisations do, what do organisations do? In the macro possible sense, what do they do? Any thoughts, anyone?
Certain goal.
Yes, they're working for a goal, but when you think about all the things an organisation does, so you've got projects on one side, but what's the other stuff they do? If it's not a project, what is it?
They deliver like some value to the customers.
Yes, by doing what? By doing what sort of things?
Business as usual.
Sorry, say again.
Business as usual.
Your business as usual. So that's creating products or services or delivering advice or whatever it is, right? So you've sort of got this environment where you've got projects but they have to operate in this wider environment of an organisation. So it's really important to keep that in mind, because those two things are constantly competing. Now, they should be complementary if it's done well, but they also compete. I'm just going to wrap up this point here now, that where we are today is on the cusp of Industry 4, version 4. Now, some people would argue that it actually started a while ago, because it's all about now things like agile ways of working, utilising, not just playing with automation and other decision management tools, but really now starting to use AI and automation and technology in replacement of people in some respects. So data science is now becoming a key part of the project tool set. The reason why that's really important is because projects are now becoming continuous. They're becoming not something you do once in an organisation and then the project will all go away again, and we're going to do another project and bring in another bunch of people. Project management and project execution under these latter evolutions are becoming a continuous feature of organisations, which then creates a really significant point. And that is, if it's going to be a continuous activity that's happening alongside BAU, and projects are now happening almost continuously all the time, because organisations are constantly evolving, particularly as the technologies and demands evolve constantly on them, then you have to build project management as a competency in the organisation, where many organisations have thought about doing projects as one-offs, or I'll get some expertise in, I get the people, they do the job, and then when they leave, I don't mind so much if they leave. And if I want to do another project, I'll hire another batch. That's becoming harder and harder to do, because the skill set is evolving and becoming now a core capability. So that leads me to this point, which is that, and this is a quote from what was the theme of the Australian Institute of Project Management conference just before COVID. And the reason why I took this one just before COVID is because many things happened that have influenced the shape of project management since COVID. So in 2019, we were talking about project and portfolio practitioners, people involved in change, needing to put themselves at the forefront of business agility. Pretty relevant point when you think about what happened with COVID. Suddenly projects being done remotely, suddenly as norm, suddenly people coming and going and working in multiple different roles all the time. You get the gist, so on and so forth. So this has not gone away. If anything, under that Industry 4 type version mindset, it's becoming more and more prevalent. Okay. Now, we said at the start, projects, we only do projects for one reason, and that is because they help an organisation get better at doing what it does in BAU. Now, when I say better, that could be delivering the current things it does more efficiently, more of them, okay, so more for less, or more for the same, delivering new services, expanding, growing, acquiring, etc., etc. But it does all that as part of delivering the organisation strategy. Welcome. Now, the difference is this, and that's what this data is saying, is that organisations that take to heart that role of project management as being a core capability that I referred to before, they fundamentally do better in terms of project delivery and business outcomes than organisations that don't take it seriously. Okay? And by seriously, I mean they're planning for projects on a multi-year basis, which is that first measure, that they are organisations that are thinking about how strategy formulation and day-to-day implementation need to interweave rather than be separate, okay? And they're using projects as something that the C-suite, the executive team, focus on day-to-day just as much as their BAU stuff. Because for many organisations, that's still not the norm, unfortunately. They think about projects as being out back, they focus on the BAU and lots of metrics on BAU, and they only focus on projects when what happens?
Close to the deadline.
Sorry, say again?
Close to the deadline.
When they're close to the deadline, or even worse,
Over the deadline.
they're over the deadline. Or, in other words, when the project's in trouble. Okay? Does it make some sense? So this is about the organisations that do well recognise this concept under sort of Industry 3, Industry 4 evolution, that projects are part of the DNA of what organisations are. This just reinforces that point because we made it earlier on, thank you, this gentleman here, about BAU. So projects don't operate in a vacuum. They operate within this broader landscape of the strategy. So what do we want to be when we grow up? What services, what functions, who do we want to serve, so on and so forth. How do we grow? How do we acquire? How do we sort of strengthen our business? Translate that through, and those things typically are about strengthening the day-to-day operations. So unless the project's like an M&A, so merger and acquisition, which is, you know, inorganic growth, acquiring, but even then, once you've acquired the business, you integrate it into your normal operations. So all strategy is about growing and improving the BAU normal operations in some way or another, inorganic or organic. Projects are the lever to facilitate a lot of that. Hence, you can't look at projects in a vacuum. That's all that point's trying to make here. So let's talk now about the context of projects. This reinforces that point. This is not the vacuum. So projects at the centre here, just because I like to think projects should be at the centre. The reality is many organisations are on the outer, it works the other way, this works the other way around. But this is just trying to say that when you come from the outside layers of the onion and you peel them back and you get to the centre, at the heart of organising change and helping organisations grow and take shape is this thing called a project. Now, it means different things to different organisations. We won't get hung up on what the definition of a project is per se, because I'm going to assume you already know that, but I'm talking about something that is for a definitive purpose. It runs within some constraints or boundaries of a definitive schedule and a budget, and to deliver a specific outcome. There's the simplest possible definition, okay? We can get more complex if we really wanted to, but we don't want to. So with this in mind, what do you think would be the most important thing to understand? So if I've just said to you, we're now going to go off and start a new project, okay? And that's all I've said so far. We're going to go off and start a new project. What do you think would be the most important thing to understand right at this very moment? If I've just said, let's go start a new project. What do you think you'd want to know? What's the most important thing you'd want to understand or know before we do anything else?
Needs.
The scope?
Yeah.
It's important, yes.
Needs. Needs.
Oh, okay, yeah, the needs.
Needs.
Yes, good. And sorry, you were going to say?
Yeah, objective.
Yeah. And before the needs and the objectives, go back a step. What's the reasoning that we understand the need or the objective of the project? What sits at the very kernel, at the very heart?
Strategy, the reason strategy.
Strategy could be? Sorry?
Problem.
The problem. Thank you. The why. Why are we doing so? Before I just get up, and can you all just get up off your seats and let's go out and do a project, the first thing that's going to come to your mind subconsciously, you're probably all thinking it, was why? 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 What is the problem we're trying to solve? What's the business need? And yes, relate those to strategy. And off the back of that, yes, we will define scope. But if you're not clear around unpeeling that onion to do the project, if you're not clear about the why, the problem we're trying to solve, or maybe another way of saying it in a more positive way, is the opportunity that we're trying to realise. Either one's perfectly valid. Just say you sort of like glass half empty or glass full. I don't know if you've heard that analogy before. But it is that why thing is the most critical bit. I call it the elevator pitch. So imagine if you hop in the elevator and the CEO of the organisation is there and he or she knows you're working on a project and they're asking you how the project's going. You want to be able to explain to them, yeah, it's going pretty well, but you also want to explain to them, going well to solve what? Okay? Does that make sense? All right. This puts it a little bit more broadly. So to answer some of those why questions, ascertain the problem, is, what is the need for the change? Is it deliver a new strategy? Is it because something's not working? Something's broken? Then it's asking ourselves, does it have to be a project? Things can change and improve without the need to do a deliberate project effort, money, costs, people, all deliberately wrapped around it. But you're asking yourself, in order to make that change, can it be done incrementally? Or does it require a more substantial, definitive, deliberate, separate, if another way of thinking it, separate change, outside of the BAU? That might be outside the capabilities of the BAU, maybe another way of thinking about it. It requires a different set of skills, different set of capabilities to enact the change. As a result of that, does it require a dedicated project and dedicated investment? So the why question is really important, that problem question is really important, not just to understand the reason why they should be doing some sort of change, but also to help inform the nature of the change, to decide, do we need a project or not? Because not everything needs to be a project. Having decided, however, that it is a project, we've gone through our why questions. We understand we want to do a project, we're committed to do a project, we all get up off our seats and do a project. There's two fundamental elements of understanding what's next. We sort of refer to those as sort of project definition and then project delivery. Now the project definition is this gentleman's part starting with scope, which relates off objectives and needs. Having understood why, worked out what objectives of understanding how to address the problem. So we've got a problem or an opportunity, we decide we want to address that in some way, so we set some objectives for doing a project, which is going to address some business needs, but to deliver those, we're going to decide what's the scope of the project. Now, the simplest way of thinking about scope is simply saying, what are the things that we have to do to deliver those needs? To meet the project objective and to deliver an outcome. So the scope is essentially saying, thinking about it in the context of, if my project was to get from my home to this lecture theatre today, okay, the objective was to arrive on time at the lecture theatre. Okay? The scope was everything in between. How was I going to travel? What methods was I going to use? What resources would I need to get here? Would I need a Myki card? Would I need my car keys? Would I need petrol in the car? Think about the scope. Does that make some sense? Put some shape around it. So the left-hand side there, the lighter blue, is all about defining the why and the what of the project. The darker blue is what we refer to as sort of like the how we're going about it. Now what can happen in projects sometimes is, and maybe a simpler way of looking at this, like I'm just going to take you up a level. I'll come back to this in a second. A simple way of looking at this is if I was to divide the screen in half between the first two and the latter two, they are essentially, again, another way of saying the why and the what, distinct from the how. Can you see that? Does that make a bit of sense? Why we're going to do it, the why and the what we're going to do, and then the how we're going to go about doing it. So what is the preferred response and what's the solution? They are about the how we're going to go about addressing the reason for the project and the solution and the need we're trying to resolve. If I go back a little bit. The reason why it's important to think about it in that really simple, super high-level view is for one reason. Many projects, that's why I was asking who's been involved in projects before. When you started, I think this lady, when you started one of the projects you were on, what was the role you were doing in the project?
Product owner
Right, okay, so from the business, you're expressing for the business needs.
and technical.
Okay, so without trying to upset you or being offensive, when you reflect back on that project now, did you start with the why or did you start with the how?
Start with like the pains and needs of our customers.
So you start with the why. Excellent. Well done. Not every project starts like that, unfortunately. For many people, we go straight into the how. It's what I call the Nike syndrome, the just do it. Now,
Usually as executives, they have like an idea what should be the solution.
yeah. Nothing. I love nothing better than being a project manager and having some executive who knows nothing about really what happens, how the organisation really works, come in and saying, I want you, Rob, to go put a new system in. And better still, put in system ABC, because I just saw them at a conference and it looked really flash. And you go, well, that's a lovely solution, but can we just step back and for a second think about what's the problem? So the why should always, sounds simple, the why should always precede the how. It's one of those really simple little tests you can apply as a project professional, no matter what role you sit in, whether it be as a product owner, as a project manager, as a sponsor, as an executive writing out the check to do it, as someone involved as a developer, what doesn't really matter what your role is, everyone should understand the why. Because how else, if you don't know what the why is, how else can you measure everything else that follows? Is it going to solve the why? Because that's the reason we're doing the project. Does it make sense? Okay, cool. Right, I'm not going to label that too much more. I mean, there is this little bit here I'll touch on just briefly. around project success. Now, historic version of project success was defined by really delivering the piece of work to scope, having wrestled it really tightly. So keep scope and do not change it, sort of thing. You know, never change scope. Don't let them do anything else whatsoever other than what we've agreed up the front. So within the scope, deliver it basically to schedule and to budget. That was defined as project success for many people. But what's the real measure of project success? Now, if you want a clue, it is up on the board. What's the real measure of project success?
Answering the problems.
Answering the problem, yes. But for what reason?
Meet the user expectation.
Yes, meeting that problem, meeting to the user expectation, and it's delivering an outcome that marries to the organisation's strategy, addresses the problem, and adds value. So, because I've been involved in projects, fortunately or unfortunately, that ran over time, sometimes significantly, certainly cost more money, may not even necessarily have delivered every aspect of scope, but they still delivered an organisational outcome and value, some benefits. On the other hand, I've been involved in auditing projects where they've been delivered to within an inch of the scope and within time and budget, but along the way, they haven't delivered any value because they lost sight of, they got stuck on doing the how, and they lost sight of the why. It happens more often than you can possibly imagine. So just keep all that in mind, and you'll go a long way towards being much better at the average project manager. From history. None of you guys would operate that way today, I know that for a fact. I would hope. Okay, investment management. I'm going to touch on this because this is part of this broader non-vacuum that a project operates within. Investment management is a really simple concept. Think of it as you're in an organisation, you want to run a project, you walk up to the bank inside the project, finance or whatever, and you basically say, can I have some money, sir, please, or madam? And they give you a bag of money. You walk out the door, right, I've got a bag of money, now I'm going to do my project. Okay, that's only one half of the investment management equation. What's the other half? Coming back, hopefully, with a bigger bag of money to put back into the bank. Okay? So investment management, at its highest and simplest form, is borrowing some money on the premise that you're going to give something back. And we'll talk about the elements of project management and business casing, that sort of thing, that help you define that. More broadly, investment management, we looked at it through this how, through this why and what, so you look at it through the why and what analogy as well. I won't labour this, but there's basically some questions that you can, this is from the Department of Treasury. If you haven't had a look, you can go public domain, go to victorian.gov.au, look up Department of Treasury, you can go to Treasury and Finance, I think they're still called that, the Treasury and Finance, and you can see under there, they have a whole range of materials around investment management standards, project delivery, their stage gate approvals model for getting finance, to getting your projects financed, as well as guidance around reporting and how to execute projects. I'll caution it by saying it is a more waterfall orientated set of documentation and methods, so it's more about traditional ways of project, a bit more like Industry 2 than it is Industry 3 or 4, okay? But it's still a really valuable basis for understanding the core values of successful projects, okay? You then just got to take it and bring it up into a bit more modern era. That's where some of these questions come from. There's all about attesting to value in a project, which is really important. And doing it from both the investment management angle, think of that as like from the business needs angle, and the project management questions, in this instance being obviously the people inside the project, but I won't labour it. Equally, when you think about then going up a level to investment management, this has been a big part of the work that I do in most organisations I've been in, is I run the investment management function as part of a overall enterprise-wide project management office or transformation function or some combination thereof, which is essentially from an investment management perspective is charged with not just running what we've spoken about for one project, but running it over a whole portfolio of projects. So, for example, most recently Bank of Queensland, the annual investment was about $300 odd million worth of projects across a whole range of different projects: product, strategy, new services, remediation, regulatory, all sorts of stuff. Right? Sounds like a lot. Wasn't too bad. At Telstra, where I was before Bank of Queensland, 7 years there, the average spend we spent on projects was between $3.5 to $5 billion per year. So over the course of 7 years there, I watched the consumption and safeguard the consumption of about $40 billion worth of spend. So in that context, investment management is a much bigger tool and a much bigger thing, and it's about optimising the portfolio of work. So all these questions that apply at the level of one project apply equally when you're looking at a program of multiple projects, or multiple programs, or programs within a portfolio, or multiple portfolios, or the whole enterprise. Whichever way you want to cut and dice it, however you want to sort of corral it, the same basic sort of functions here apply to define this investment management. But importantly, they all go back to the why and the what, the why and the how. Why, what, and how. Pretty straightforward. So in that context then, of thinking about the broader portfolio of projects, you get this sort of dynamic happening. So this is sort of the world according to Rob around how we tie together a continuous loop. So a continuous loop from defining strategy and refreshing strategy to understanding what does strategy look like when it grows up, which is sort of what I call target architecture. Think of it as how the organisation is going to look and operate, through to deciding what investments you need to occur. So you create some investment roadmaps or maps, so then you go about delivering it. Along the top of that, you've essentially gone from defining objectives and goals into what capabilities and changes you need to do, and then into prioritising and delivering them. Working backwards from that, because we only do delivery for one reason, that's to drive benefit. Working backwards from that is understanding the doability of the work we want to do, the capacity to do it within the constraints of the organisation, so dollars, resource, knowledge, will, culture, etc. Those factors are just as big a factors as is having the dollars and the people. And then back into are the things, the most feasible things that we should be doing. Running at the bottom there, you see prioritisation and benefits realisation. Those two are constants. They could loop around the entire process if you want to do that. So essentially you've got deciding why you need to do things, through to what to do, through to delivering it, and then understanding what value it pushes back into the organisation, delivering back to strategy. And then at the bottom is the constant prioritisation that goes on. Now, why do you think we have to constantly prioritise? If I've gone through the effort from left to right of defining my strategy, thinking about what the organisation is going to look like and how it's going to operate when it grows up, to deciding a roadmap of projects and changes I'm going to do, and then I've delivered them, sounds great, sounds pretty neat. Why do I need to have this prioritisation thing? Why do I need to have this constant prioritisation thing happening? Any thoughts? What else is happening in the organisation? Remember, it doesn't operate in a vacuum. So I've done my plan, I've delivered my plan, hopefully the things that delivered value, but what else is happening along the way? What happens in your organisation? What happens in your household today? Is it the same thing every day? Same thing tomorrow?
Change management.
Change, yeah, and you've got to manage it. Prioritisation is part of managing change. Because the reality is the priorities and the strategy is typically done some time ago. And even if it's often done years ago, and then you're delivering to it over time, the strategy can evolve, whether because of internal reasons or because of external reasons. So therefore you have to have this prioritisation vehicle running across the bottom, because no matter how many times you go through that linear process, there's other factors changing it. That's that non-vacuum factors, if you like. Strategies change, competitors change, markets change, so on and so forth. Organisations that thought they had a perfectly viable product to deliver to the market today find the consumers no longer want their product, or they want it delivered in a very different way. Okay? Lots and lots of examples of that we could talk about them ad nauseum, but we'll get distracted, so I won't. Yes, hello, question.
How often do you think the company should revise their strategy per year?
How often they should revise the strategy? So let's go back a step and think about what strategy should be. So strategy is essentially saying, in really simplistic terms, what do we want to be when we grow up? Okay. Now, breaking that down a little bit, it's about what markets we want to play in, what products, what services we want to deliver, and to whom. Okay. And then it's about, you know, how we're going to go about doing that. You know, we're going to do that just domestically, we're going to do it overseas. So strategy is about really how you're going to grow up and how you're going to operate. When you think about that, there's lots in that. Typically, you would expect most organisations should devise a strategy that is sort of at least 3 to 5 years and ideally 10 years or more horizon. Okay, thinking about it long, because strategy should be longer term. Strategy is not, what am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow morning? Right? Strategy is not, what am I going to have for breakfast Tuesday next week? Strategy might be, am I going to have breakfast ever again? Right? So strategy should be formulated over a longer term. But then how often should it be refreshed, which is your real question? Minimum annually would be to refresh it. I would advocate at least annually. And then along the way, because it's quite an effort to do it, along the way I use these other vehicles of prioritisation and benefit realisation to inform, is strategy being delivered? That's the reason they're there. So not only to accommodate what changes are occurring, but even if there wasn't change occurring, which would be a lovely place to be, is the stuff that we're doing, is it delivering the outcomes that we expected that marry back to our strategy? And if the answer is no or not quite, then there's a need to refresh. To refresh the roadmaps, to maybe even refresh the strategy itself. We've delivered a whole lot of stuff, but it's not working. It's not delivering the benefit. Is that the project's problem, or is that a strategy problem? Are we doing the wrong things really well, as opposed are we doing the wrong things? Full stop. Okay. Yep.
I don't understand why the investment allocation and prioritization should be conducted also, but why the role is going to left. What does it mean?
Because you prioritise the prioritisation and the benefits realisation in this instance that I'm talking about, you could draw an arrow at either end. It goes backwards and forwards. But the point I was trying to make here is that having set your strategy from left through to right and then delivering a roadmap of change and projects, you want to understand, are they delivering back to the strategy? So does that make sense? It's just that. Okay? If you're drawing this in a really perfect way, the whole thing would be a series of circles feeding in on each other. But that gets really messy. So trying to break the consulting, trying to create the perfect consulting picture here of, the only thing I'm missing is a pyramid and a circle. So if you get in a perfect consulting diagram, if you can get, a square, a circle, a pyramid, and you get them all interacting, you're there. You're done, right? Okay, this is not that, because I was trying to demonstrate a different point. Look, I'm going to skip this because we really just talked about it. The point here is about, for defining strategy and prioritising things, there's options analysis and all that sort of stuff. The things that are really important here is about this ongoing portfolio adjustment. This is the vacuum point. Again, things that operate in a vacuum, you have the performance of what's going on in the organisation and the project portfolios. You have broader performance dynamics happening. In other words, are we hitting targets? Are we delivering profits? Is margins or prices going left, right or centre? All those things might influence change in the portfolio of work. Okay? But I won't labour that too much more. Let's get in now to shaping a project and getting on with it. We've already discussed the why we do a project, and we've agreed that. We talk about business needs. This gentleman raised that before. And the really important thing, and I said it when we said at the start, before we get up off the seat and start doing our project, this was the critical point, was understand the why we want to do the project, and then what business needs or problem are we trying to solve. The really important aspect of that, now this might be a little bit hard to see. Oh, it's not too bad. I have to come back. I haven't got my glasses on. But this is meant to be slightly humorous, although I sometimes find it really funny and sometimes I find it really sad. It depends on what projects I'm running right now, because I've got probably the odd project too that looks like this. Now this is all about, so what's going on here? Have a quick read of it, then you tell me what do you think's going on around why projects, you need to be clear. Why would you put this effort in about the why and the problem statements and understanding the needs, etc. Does So digest it for 30 seconds. That'll give me a chance to finish my coffee, and then we'll ask some questions. All right, who's got a project like this? Who's been involved in a project like this? Anyone? Oh, many times. And yourself, yeah, and yourself. What do you think's going on here? What causes? So if we've all had elements of this lack of clarity or things changing along the way, that means we're not clear about what we're trying to deliver, and therefore the thing winds up delivering something very different than what we really needed. What do you think's behind that? What's some of the causes or issues at play here that could be driving that in your experience, or if not in your experience, and what do you just think could be driving it?
Miscommunication.
Sorry?
Miscommunication.
Miscommunication, yes.
Poor understanding from the client side.
Poor understanding, yeah, maybe from the concept.
Lack of transparency between stakeholders.
Yeah, people not communicating, but actually not being very transparent about their goals or their objectives, hidden agendas, that sort of thing. Were you suggesting something?
The objectives is not clear enough.
The objectives weren't clear enough at the start. Yeah, so the why wasn't clear enough at the start. Which is the reason why I had the little SMART acronym up there. People are familiar with that? Yeah. About goal setting? Okay, so we won't labour it. Other than saying, it's one of those little, tiny, simple, sometimes almost silly tools that you can have in your tool bag. So as a project manager, in your tool bag, or a project professional, in your tool bag, sitting at the top should be this. Sitting at the top should be the why and the what and the how, understanding the difference between definition versus delivery. We'll talk about some other tools that you should have in your tool bag along the way as well. So then every time you go to a new project and you tip your toolbox out, the very first thing you should be getting out is, why are we doing this project? Can I describe, when I talk to people, when I communicate with them, and we try and understand their objectives and we try and get transparent about the needs, we can try and put it through this lens of SMART. And if it's not quite ticking all those boxes about it's not really very specific, there's no measures, I'm not really understanding it, the relevance of it, we're not defining over what period it might have to happen, etc. And you can do this at whole of project level, or you can do it at individual milestones, individual scope items. You can do this up and down the level, all the levels of a project. If things aren't ticking those boxes, it's not to say the thing is bad, or is going to be wrong, or is going to die, but it should be a little warning sign to say, we could be staring into some problems down the track. So now's a good time, early in the life of the project, to try and get these things clearer. Because where was, in this little diagram, in this sort of, if you go from left to right and then down and left to right again, where was the earliest opportunity to avoid or to try and fix this project? To avoid the problem in the first place or to try and fix it? Is it the second from the right at the bottom, or is it the one in the middle at the top? I mean, where would you want to try and intervene, using maybe a SMART analogy? Where would you have wanted to intervene if this was your project, to avoid the disaster that happened?
The second one.
Yeah.
Which have you understood it?
Maybe how they understood, yeah, because someone's tried to describe it. Yeah, and if you assume that's the right description, the customer knows what they want. At the very next one, the person whether it's a project leader or whether you talk whatever title you want to use, that very next interaction was probably the best opportunity where they tried to clarify it. Because what should have happened? So the project leader understood it that way, but what should they have done next, rather than just moving on to start essentially saying build it? What could they have done, having heard it that way in their mind's eye? Thank you. Simple, isn't it? Project management is really simple. It is fundamentally for dummies, but we complicate it because we put processes and stuff around it, and we sometimes make it harder than what it needs to be. So just focusing on success factors for a second, I won't labour all these, you can read these at your leisure, but essentially when you think about it, the things that really, and we've just been touching on a few of them, and that diagram's a really important sort of analogy, and it's a bit funny, but the things that are really important to project success, particularly with this definition, because we haven't got into doing a project yet, we're into talking about it. We're talking about what the project is and why we're doing it. And the reason why I'm labouring all that, because it's the single most thing you can take away from today, is when you're commissioned to do a project, put the effort in up front to understand the why. The why, the problem, the needs, etc. Before you start getting too deeply involved in the Nike syndrome of just doing it. So the things in the top half there are sort of like the success factors, right? So if you take the counterpoint of all these and turn them into the success factors, it's about that clarity. Clarity of vision, clarity of the direction, clarity of what we're trying to do, why we need to change. Have we got the right people involved to validate and have that conversation, understand everyone's needs, or manage expectations if we're not going to meet their need. Get the right resources, manage the change appropriately. And that should, if we do that, then it helps address these things at the bottom, which are typically the things that go wrong. Most projects don't blow up 5 minutes before they finish. They start going wrong. Oops. Go back a bit. They start going wrong, as we said early on. So the best time to intervene is at the start. Getting that clarity. Because most projects go wrong progressively rather than at the very end because of the things we didn't do at the start. Yes?
I think one problem that I always have is when I need to cancel a project because I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah.
And you have many people involved and you have people that spend time, invested money. When do you think it's time to cancel the project without this story?
Oh, look, the smug answer would say at the earliest possible opportunity, right? The more technical answer would say at the earliest signs that you don't have stakeholders aligned on what we should be delivering or why we're doing it. So if you start getting a whole lot of mixed different demands and they can't agree and align on what the project should be doing, aligning on the scope, or that starts seeing lots of pressure to change it constantly, that's probably one of the biggest warning signs for me. I mean, the classics of then is not delivering to time or cost. They're usually symptoms of something else. They're usually symptoms of we haven't got the thing right in terms of what we're trying to do or why we're trying to do it, and we haven't got the parties agreeing and aligned on what it is. So that to me is one of the biggest warning signs. And it goes to this stuff here. It's these top half things when you think about it in that context. Okay, so we've got our project. We are now all very attuned and aligned about why we're doing it, what it's trying to do, what needs we're trying to meet, how it relates to strategy, where it fits in a portfolio of work. Whew, we've done all that. We've done a lot in the last 45 minutes. How good are we? Now we're into the hard stuff. We're taking our one project and starting to deliver it. You'll see the same theming here again, the why, the what, and the how. Even though we've now come down to getting on to actually defining the piece of work, the same basic formula and logic, so it's none of those tools you put in your toolkit, is sort of those basic questions, why, what, and how. And doing each in turn. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're doing this, I'll talk about this a little bit later on, whether you're doing this through the lens of waterfall projects, agile projects, lean, Six Sigma, it doesn't matter what the method for how is. So this is not what method I'm talking about here. I'm talking about how you're going to plan and approach the project irrespective of delivery method. Because irrelevant to the method, which simply works out, methods simply define how you break up the work and progress the work over time. And how clear are you up front versus how much do you iterate it on the way through. That's all the methods do. That's all they change, right? But the fundamental macro method I'm talking about here is being clear about the plan and the approach and what resources, how long it's going to take, and how do you integrate all those elements together with risk and stakeholder engagement, all those sort of things, into an integrated plan. Having started back with the why and the what, which we've already covered off, so I won't labour those unless there are any questions about this slide. Does that make a bit of sense? Just give you a few basic steps. And it's asking you, so the theory being really, before you move on in the practice, before you start getting into the what, which is all about the solution we're going to do, and then in the how, which is how we're going to build it and put it together, is just ask yourself, do I know enough about the why? Okay, so I've got that. Now I've done the what. I've done some work around the what. And that could go through several cycles. So depending on what method the project is using for delivery, you might define the what progressively over time. But before you move on to each next iteration, you're asking yourself, have I got enough clarity about the what to actually now start building it? Best analogy for this is building a house. We're building a house because we want coverage and protection from the elements, or we want something flash to show our neighbours, or what, it doesn't really matter. We're clear about the why. The what is the what of building a house? The how is dumping a heap of materials on the block and a builder starts putting them all together. That's the how. What is the what of a house, of the plan to build a house? We've got the why. We want protection from the elements. We want coverage. We want to have it nice, etc., etc. The how is all the materials we need and the order in which you're going to put things together. What is the what?
The type of the house?
Sorry?
Maybe the model of the house?
The model, yeah, the model. The model or the architect or the blueprint. Yeah, exactly. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
So you ask yourself the same thing in any other project. Have I got the blueprint, the map, the model? And that could be at different levels, but in different methodologies. But have I got enough of it to move in to start building the how? Because you don't, when you're building a house, I go from why, I'm going to dump a whole lot of materials on the plan, and I'm going to get the builder and say, away you go, do your thing, just build it, right? You say, I want it to look like this. I want to have this many rooms. And progressively, you might say, I want gold taps or brass taps, but you progressively refine some of it. But you start with a model. Yes?
So is a project management plan a what or a how?
So project management plan is part of the how. Because it's telling you how you're going to build the what. The what is the solution or the design. Does that make some sense? Is that okay?
If I think about it.
Okay, so the what is, think of the what as the picture. You know, okay, we'll do it this way. Jigsaw puzzle. Okay? Let's not worry about the why. It's because we're bored. We're doing a jigsaw puzzle because we're bored, it's raining, or it's COVID. We're locked in the house. That's why we're doing jigsaw puzzles. All right? The what of the jigsaw puzzle is the picture on the box. It's the model. It's the plan. Yeah? What it should look like at the end. The how is when you tip all the pieces out. How do you do a jigsaw puzzle? How do you go about doing a jigsaw puzzle? Okay. Some people start trying to get all the outside ones first and work in. Others start with different colours or whatever. Yeah? So we might have different hows. Okay, but the what, we all need to land at the same picture. We don't achieve project success if we don't create the jigsaw puzzle to look like the picture that's on the front of the box. We also don't create success if we've got a whole lot of extra pieces in our back pocket that we've left and we can't work out where they fit, so we push them off the floor and off the desk and drop them on the floor and pretend they don't exist, because we'll have gaps in the picture again. So that they are all about the what. The how is what's the way in which you go about tackling the pieces, and people can tackle that in different ways. I like finding all the ones that have got a flat edge, because I know they go on the outside, and then I work my way in. But that's just the way I like to do it. Other people do it differently. When you're not clear about things like the why, the what, the how, it sounds a bit silly, but try and find a simple analogy like the house analogy or the jigsaw puzzle. Or who does Lego here? Anyone did Lego when you were a kid? Or building blocks or something like that? Yeah. I still love Lego, right? I think it's the best things ever invented. Which, if anything, if I had the perfect job, apart from doing what I'm doing today, just in case my boss is listening, I'd be a Lego designer. That would be the most beautiful job in the world, I reckon, right? So you think about Lego. Lego breaks down this why, what, how thing almost perfectly. Can you think about how? Well, I've said that out loud. What do you think I'm referring to when I think about Lego does perfectly the why, the what, and the how? What are some of the elements that come to your mind when I say that? Because it is the most perfect project. Buying a box of Lego and putting it together is a project. So what's the why, the what, and the how with the Lego experiment? There's no right or wrong answer. So what's the thought? Any thoughts? No one done Lego recently?
For the why, it's just I want to build it.
Yeah, I want to have some fun, right? Yeah, exactly. I'm bored. I want to do it with my kids, or I just love Lego, right? I love building things, right? So that could be the why. What's the what? Lego's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? Comes in a box. What's on the front of the box and what's on the back of the box?
Example would be
pictures and models of what it could look like. All right? Now, people can do whatever they want with Lego. You can create something totally different. But what's the first thing? Before you create something different, maybe this is the way I do it, before I create something different out of the Lego pieces I've got, I always create what they intended it to be first. So that's the what. How do they do the how? What's so special about the how of Lego? And they've got better and better at this over the years, by the way. What's the how? How do they make it really easy, make it really clear to understand the plan? So a very detailed instruction, piece by piece instruction, yes. Most of us, well maybe the guys in the room, tend to ignore that until you get stuck and then you go back and start doing the instruction. But what else have they done? How do the pieces come? You tip it all out, there's all just thousands of pieces. How do they come these days? They've bundled them. They've put them in little packets. They've bundled a different part. They've made the thing componentised. And they've put things together, like pieces together, that build a piece or a component of the what. So they've made the how really easy to follow. Even if you didn't have the instruction, you could almost intuitively put together each of the components, then work out how they fit together. So, sorry, I digress. But my point being, if you're not really clear in your project, sometimes go back to the basics of the jigsaw puzzle or the house building or maybe the latest Lego thing you've done or something similar, because they do a really good job. And sometimes that simple analogy helps just sort of create an abstract view of what you're doing that allows you to test what you're doing. Does it make sense? Am I doing the right thing? Where are we really at in this? What problems could we be having? This gentleman, scope definition, scope management. Sorry, your name?
Zane.
Hey, Zane. Scope definition. You mentioned that really early on as one of the most important things to understand about a project. Why was that important to you?
If you work towards achieving that.
Yes, and how does scope help you do that? How does scope help you achieve the end outcome?
You plan according to the scope, you know what resources you need, you know what.
Yep, excellent. Right, exactly right. Hence the reason why scope does not start with all the detail about the what, it starts with the project objectives. Because the scope is simply another way of breaking down and putting some clarity and some definition around the why and the what. And it does set up, when you think about scope, it describes, the way it was explained to me when I first started doing projects, which feels like 1,000 years ago, was scope defines all the things you have to do, all the activity, all the things you have to do to build the end outcome or solution. And if it's not in the scope statement or statements, then it's not in the project. That was the and to it. Okay? Now the reality is we know scope can change and sometimes it should change for the better. Okay? But so this just gives you a little bit of a formula, a bit of a process for doing that. The critical steps on this are really around, actually now I've just looked at it, I realise there's one missing, but that's okay. We'll talk about it. Under sort of, having sort of done the stop and check direction, step 5 that's there, there's one piece it's implicit, but I should have made it explicit, so my apologies. What is equally important, if not even more so, than understanding what is in the scope of work? What's the almost equally, if not more so important, understanding what is in the scope of work?
What's not in?
What is not in the scope of work? So it's important to understand, the project is everything that's in the scope, right? It's equally important to understand what's not in. Why?
Reduce waste.
Yeah, we certainly don't do effort that we're not commissioned to do, or that doesn't add value. What else?
Mitigate the risk of having changes in this scope.
It could do that as well. Yep. What else?
Avoid the over specification.
Yes, it can. Yeah, which is a bit like waste and overwork. There's even something more fundamental. Yeah, so it goes back to who needs what. Some people will want things, while the bonnet is up of doing a project, they will want things to be done inside the project that the project is not intended to do. So having the debate early on around what is in scope and what is not, specifically the what is not, is an incredibly powerful tool to be able to work with stakeholders to manage expectations. Because what you don't want is you've gone and constructed the project and done all the work, you've spent all that money, all that effort, all the angst, all the emotion, and then some bunch of stakeholders come on at the end and say, where's my bit? Or what you've built isn't what I had in mind. Or it's not the same, it's not the colour I wanted, right? Or whatever it is. Now, I've been a little bit silly with that last one, but the point being this, you want to have the debate. Remember, go back to the swing. You want to have the debate in those first couple of blocks, maybe backwards and forwards a little bit if you have to, that clarity of what it is we have to do. And if the project is not commissioned to do certain things, then you want to get that documented and agreed with the relevant stakeholders early on so you can manage their expectation. That, sorry, this project is not going to deliver your favourite thing. Not this time round. Not this project, not commissioned to do so. Or, if we do have to do that, then let's have the discussion about this stuff. Or about the extra time it might take. Or something else has to be traded off to put that thing in. So we have an expectation, conversation. That's the fundamental reason why scope definition is important early on. In life, it's about managing being that definitional piece and clarity of expectations so you can manage them. And as we make our way through, it's all about informing the work that follows. Because the work that we're then planning in the detail, if we start planning out the detailed plans and schedules by whatever method we're doing them, over time or all up front, doesn't really matter. But as we start to go to that next level of detail, we should be checking those activities against, are they delivering within the scope of work? Because delivering the scope of work delivers to the objectives of the project, which delivers to solving the problem that we had, which is the reason why we're doing the project in the first place. If you follow the logic link? Okay. Is this pitching okay for you guys, or is this sort of too low, too high? Is it useless, healthy? Oh, good. Okay, about right. All right. If it's not, tell me. I can go up or down. I could talk underwater for a million years, but I won't. All right. Business case. So the business case, in its simplest possible form, is simply a way of communicating. So having gone through this work up front of agreeing why and what, the business case is going back to investment management. The business case is a mechanism that simply allows us to have this bag of money decision. Before I get the bag of money, before they just give me the bag of money, I've got this sort of concept of business case that is justifying. I want to do that. We've got this why, a problem to solve, a bunch of needs to try and address through a piece of work called a project. So I now want some money, thank you very much. In return for that money, I'm going to go deliver this scope of work that's going to create these outputs and deliverables, and it's going to put back in the bigger bag of benefit. That's essentially what the business case tells you. That's what the business case says. Why we're doing it, what problem we're trying to solve, broadly speaking, what solution we're going to deploy, how we're going to go about it, and particularly with the how much time it's going to cost, what sort of money it's going to take to get the resources, materials, etc. we need. And in return for all that, as we address the problem, this is the benefit that we create. It might be another bag of money, it might be a better customer service, it might be that we help increase our market share, acquire new customers, stay out of jail, whatever the case may be. Okay? That's essentially what it's doing. It's the reason why it's this loop between problem and benefit as seen through the lens of what response or what solution we put in place. Does that make sense? So because the solution, and the reason for that loop is because the response or intervention or the thing we do to create a solution with assets, physical, non-physical, whatever the case may be, a little bit of technical speak here, but the response and the solution do the two things of solving the problem and delivering a benefit. And at its heart, that's the business case. It communicates the symbiotic relationship between those things. But it enables you, by answering that question, it enables you to say, oh, before I push the bag of money to you, how do I feel about spending that money? Because guess what? Behind you, in the line, are 10 other people that also want a bag of money. And I've only got oh gosh, I've only got one bag of money left. So who do I give it to? So the business case put my teeth back in, helps inform that investment management discussion. Remember I talked about if investment management for one project, really simple. For many projects, many demands in an organisation with constraints, as they all have, the investment management process helps you work out through prioritisation which ones you want to, which bets you want to place the money on, okay, as to optimise the amount of money that you've got for the return that you could get. So at the individual level, the business case is a vehicle for doing that. What other thing does a business case, what other value or purpose could a business case perform relative to your project? Who's been involved in writing a business case or contributing to a business case? A few? Okay. So what else could a business case do? What other purpose does it have, apart from getting the bag of money?
As a guide.
Refer to it after when we lose a bit the objective, we can refer to this first business case.
It's a really great reference document. It's a really great document you keep on going back to test, just like the scope is a part of the business case, is to go back to, are we still delivering value? Because most business cases get retested throughout the life of the project, particularly if there's any change going on. You might have to update and refresh the business case, retest the parameters of cost and time and benefit, etc. So it's a really important reference document to be able to go back to for a whole range of reasons. Firstly, to get the money in the first place. Secondly, the test, did we deliver the benefit we said we're going to? Because that's what we promised. The business case is basically a promise. Thirdly, it helps articulate the work we're going to do at a reasonable enough level to say, is this the right piece of work to be doing and are we doing it? Fourthly, it's a contract, essentially between the project manager and the project team and the business sponsor and other business owners that it's doing the project for. So it fulfills those multiple purposes. It's a really important core document. Doesn't matter whether it's written on back of one piece of paper or whether it's a big format standard document, okay? It still contains those same elements irrespective. And some of those elements are, philosophically, I've just covered this off, which is basically, it articulates the reason why we're going to do the change, which we've talked about a lot already. It talks about, is it helping you decide, is it worth the bag of money? Is it value for money? Okay? To do that, there's financial analysis in it. You could add to that strategic analysis, customer analysis, other things as well. There's a more commercial analysis. So not only does it deliver a benefit, but is it a sufficient enough benefit compared to other things that we could do, and compared to maybe, for example's sake, some businesses will have hurdle rates they want to achieve. So before I really want to spend money on investment, not only does it need to produce a positive outcome, but it needs to produce a positive outcome of a certain ratio compared to how much I'm prepared to spend. We call those an IRR or an MPV. Have you studied anything like that sort of stuff? Yeah, you get the picture. Management analysis is all about how's it going to work, who we're going to have involved, etc., etc. So it communicates all those sort of things. Now this is example only, right? I mean, different organisations will ask for different things and maybe in different order, but fundamentally, like I've already just talked about, fundamentally the business case covers off these two dimensions, going back to what we talked about the project definition. So a project was made up of its definition and then its delivery. The business case picks up those same two elements, funnily enough. The investment case is all about the definition, and the delivery case is mostly about the how, okay, the delivery aspects. Again, you could divide this between why and what and between how. You see that test you could almost put on almost every slide that illustrate this stuff. So that's why it's such an important concept, and one that unfortunately many projects just get tangled up in. They start doing the how before they're clear about the why, or they never really work out the why and they start doing a whole lot of what stuff. Okay, so just putting just enough pause to say, have we got enough to move forward, have we got enough clarity to avoid the swing type situation? Were you going to ask a question?
Yep. The question is, in the delivery case, in your personal opinion, how detailed it should be? Is it like step-by-step guidance, or just like, we need to do this and this and that?
Oh, yeah, look, it's, as I said, look, man, at the moment, I'm running a process at the moment. I'm about to do second half year planning at my work for what's the next lot of priorities we're going to do for the next half year. So I'm asking business, now a lot of the planning we're doing is already defined by the work we're already underway in the first half. So a lot of it will continue on. But in terms of people coming up with new ideas that they want to do, I've asked them to essentially do what I call lean canvas, which is on one page, describe these things at a really high level on one page. Now the reason why I say one page is really deliberate, because I don't want them doing a whole lot of detail behind this for something that we may never progress. I simply want a series of one pages that say, is this a good, I'm testing feasibility. Is this thing linked to strategy? Does it, relative to a bag of money, does it deliver something meaningful in return? And is it something that's feasible that we could do? And to do that, if they can describe that on one page, then that's a really solid test. Sounds simple, but it's amazing how many people then want to give you, like I had one person give me, I kid you not, overnight, 42 pages. I asked for one. They gave me 42. What do you think I'm doing with that project? Yeah, thank you very much. It's gone in the bin. Now, metaphorically speaking, I actually sent it back to them and said, guys, all you've done is you've taken everything about your last 4 meetings you've had and workshops and you just dumped it in a pack and you've given it to me to sort out. I said, go away. I probably said something else, but I said something analogous to go away. And I said, can you please, if you cannot write for the executive team on one page what the problem is, what we're trying to solve for, and broadly speaking, what you're going to do and how much money you need, then go away. Another people gave me a whole bunch of one pages, which is lovely, and they were stuck to one page, but nothing in it about what they're actually going to build or how much money they wanted. So I thought that's really interesting because we can talk about the why forever. So I understand the need. We're not going to argue about the need because it's really clear what you've defined. But you need to tell us what you want to do with it, what you want to do to address it, and give me some view about how much money you think we need to have. Because I can't just sit there and go, here's a blank cheque. So it's now at other organisations, depending on where, if I've then taken those one page and said, hey, tell you what, congratulations, we've agreed your one page project proposal, now let's go to the next stage. Now we're into this. And at different organisations, I've run this process over like a dozen pages to hundreds, to binders full of pages for one project. So it's linked to the complexity. It's linked to what's the organisation's culture, around how deep they want to go. Some people are happy to evolve the detail over time. Others want to know it all up front. So you sort of got to take those characteristics. There isn't one answer, unfortunately. But my preference would be, if you can't write the business case, talking to these these roughly 10 steps, and you can't do that with sort of 1 or 2 pages per step, then it's probably over-egging it. Particularly for the early stage analysis, to make the decision, bag of money, yes or no. Does that help? You can flick through this. This answers a bit of that question. Depending on the stage you're at and the nature of the project, it's and HVHR is high value, high return. So depending on the nature of the project and the complexity of the environment and how much you're talking about needing to borrow, if you need to borrow, and it's an important concept, I use the word borrow very deliberately, because you're borrowing from the organisation to do a project. You're borrowing from who's ever funding it, whether it be a shareholder, or the community, or the government, or the owner, but you're borrowing their money to do the project, right? So whoever you're borrowing from, they might have different rules about how much you need to do to satisfy them at different points of time. But the message here is as you move your way through the life cycle, you can extend the detail and need to get a bit more detailed over time. But that's all that's sort of really doing. The other way of expressing this is in different organisations we ran for smaller projects that were lower risk and which, lower investment, we ran a light business case process. It was only a few pages. And then the rest of the documentation would sort of evolve over time. For more complex, big strategic pieces of work that were really hairy, we want to know more detail up front. Where am I at? Okay, let's have a look. We're making good progress, I think. All right, let me pause for a second. So, stage gating. So we talked about business case and evolving over time. and we talk about the money. Now, in some organisations, that bag of money doesn't come across all at once. You might get an initial bit of money to get started, and they say, great idea, go away, come back with the next set of documentation, a bit more planning, the next set of definition, and we'll give you the next bit of money to then make it through to more detailed design. Then we'll give you the next bit of money to actually start doing delivery. Who's worked in that sort of environment before, where it's been progressive funds release? Yeah, okay, cool. So the mechanism for that is this thing called stage gates. Now, they're sometimes called different things. They could be called decision points. They could be called review points. It doesn't really matter. But I like to use the word stage gates, and quite deliberately, because they sort of really saying, I've finished that piece of work, that stage I was doing, I've sort of finished that. I'm now at this point of assessing, am I ready to move on to the next? So they're just a bit like a gate. They're just a bit like opening up the gate to walk through. And say, that's now done, I'm now ready to move on. So the other reason for that is because it then flags it's a deliberate decision that we're going through. We're making this deliberate assessment that we're ready to progress. And that there's still value in the project. And we've got clarity about what's next to follow. So that's essentially what that's doing. So now you can have stage gates in different organisations. I've run with organisations where we had 3, 4 and 5 stage gates. Someone's a stage gate 0 is this first one rather than stage gate 1. I've just gone a macro picture to give you a bit of a feel for it. But the fundamental concepts is this, is the stage gates operate to explain to you how you progress through the life of the project, progressively evolving the level of detail and certainty about what has to happen, potentially tied to progressively releasing funding to allow you to spend the money, and along the way, building out the solution design, interacting with the rebuild of the project plan and refreshing it over time and so on and so forth. Accompanied by a continuous focus on the investment. Remember, the reason we're doing the project is for an investment. Bag of money for a return. Okay? So the investment life cycle still operates throughout the project life cycle. The investment life cycle at the bottom, that initial business case, that maybe lean canvas, one-pager, short document, whatever, is all about answering the question of should we do it? Sure, we've got a problem. Sure, we've got a why. It's a really good why. But should we do a project? Do we need to do a project? That sort of test. Having agreed that, we've given them some money, they've moved on. The next question's all about, have we come up with the right answer to address the problem? So, is it the right thing to do? The answer is yes. Next bag of money, next stage gate, please walk through, sir. Tickets, please. Okay. Then it's about, can we do it? Maybe another way of saying is how will we do it? It's another way of thinking about that. But in other words, is it feasible? Is it a solution that is going to work and that we have the capacity to do? So we have the knowledge, the expertise, the resources, the funding, the time, the patience, the emotion. Those latter things just as important as the hard things. Okay? I've seen projects come undone not because of the complexity of the work, but because of the culture in which they're operating within. Or people were burnt out already and completely over stuff. Right? They were change fatigued, weren't ready for the next project. Those things are just as important to assess. And then having done that, we've now done all the work, we've packed away the toolbox, we go, thank God that's over. Or you might say, hey, give me my next one, I'm really keen, straight away. But we ask the question, have we done it? And is it sort of working? Is it delivering the value that we want it to deliver? So you see here how stage gates can help inform the progressive design and delivery of the project, and just put just enough controls on to say, is it working and are we progressing okay? And at the same time, testing that investment life cycle. Was it the right thing to do? Are we going to get our money back? Is it as much as we expected? Is it working the way the stakeholders and the other parties expected it to? Remember, project success is business success plus delivery success. Pause there for a sec. It's a bit to digest. Questions? Thoughts? People familiar with this already? Preaching to the converted, as they say? Yes?
If we have the assignment to review business case, let's say, and we want to review it. The business case is already started in previous year.
Yep.
It's already ongoing. If we want to review it, can we review the life cycle of the business case itself?
Absolutely. So, I mean, essentially at each one of these stage gates, I would recommend you are essentially reviewing the business case at each stage and answering the fundamental question of, are we ready to progress? So two questions really. Is it still the right thing to do? And are we ready to progress to the next stage? So they are both business case questions effectively. Does that answer what you're getting at? Yep. So the business case is refreshed, you know, most organisations, when they use stage gates, you refresh the business case at each gate because you are progressively adding the next level of refinement to it, or potentially flagging new issues, or you're making some decisions about, is the scope changing, are the benefits changing, how we're going to go about solving it, is that changing a little bit? So it is a refresh. Or it might be nothing's changing, it's all good, just keep going. All right, no problem. Look, many of you may not have had much involvement in this sort of concept to date, so I'm only going to mention it briefly. And that is of having set up all this planning and the business case and all the documentation to support delivery and all the hard effort that goes with it, it's important sometimes to apply what we call a level of assurance to the project. Now, assurance is simply, in its simplest possible form, is about answering these headline questions of, having gone to the effort of constructing a project and everything that supports that, does it make sense? From the point of view of, are we ready to deliver it? Is it going to work? Are we actually on track? And having done it, did we deliver what we set out to achieve? So assurance is a simple about asking, it's a bit like the stage gate model. It can actually be done through the stage gate model, or it can be done independently. Depends on the focus of some organisations. Some government departments, for example, will employ dedicated third parties, particularly specialist consultants, to come in and run the assurance process over the projects while they're running. Other organisations build this in deliberately into maybe the stage gate model, or they have it as a separate department, or maybe they sort of effectively outsource it to the audit department, audit or compliance team, etc. But either way, whatever you want to call it, it's essentially about providing the assurance that the project is, broadly speaking, operating the way it should, within the guidelines of the organisation, it's clear and it's delivering to the clarity that it has got agreed, and it's basically going to work. Or there are some red flags and there's some actions to be taken to help provide assurance that we will deliver, and that by having delivered, we will achieve the benefit. Now, assurance activities sort of wax and wane over the life cycle. Okay, they can go a bit deeper or they can be a bit shallow, depending on the nature of the organisation and where we are. But broadly speaking, assurance, a bit like the swing analogy, assurance is most critical in the early stage. So you see little blocks underneath here, a bit heavier assurance effort. Assurance is it's not particularly relevant up front because there's not much to test yet. There's nothing really to validate or assure from a assurance because you still haven't designed much about the project. But once you start getting into the more detailed work of the project, assurance is most critical. And it's most critical there rather than at the back end for, again, what reason? Why would assurance be more important up front here in the early design stages and the early sort of build stages? Bear in mind this could be multiple iterations of this over time. Why is it most important up there? Go back to our swing analogy.
Because if in the end it's already late to change everything.
Yeah, that's right. Trying to get to this point in time and you're nearly finished and you've built everything and you say, oh, guess what? I don't think it's going to work. We've run the assurance process. We don't think it's going to work and deliver a benefit. It's a bit late. The train's left the station.
I have two questions actually. So the first is what kind of tools usually used for project assurance, and the second one is what kind of intervention we can do if it's already late.
Yep. So assurance tools will vary from organisation to organisation, but typically speaking, you're talking about using risk assessment checklists. You're talking about using delivery and test measurement checklists. Some organisations will have compliance checklists around sort of, has the project followed, has the project complied with the project methodology? Sometimes has it done all the things it should do to have a solid answer? So has it done sufficient design work? Has it identified risks? Has it engaged with the various sponsors? So compliance type checklists. Other organisations will also apply financial assurance metrics. So it will be, I'm going to retest earned value on the project. I'm going to look at how it's spending its money. And is it spending to the plan that it said it was going to? Or are there variances occurring? And if so, where are they occurring and what are they occurring? Is it because of design's more complex, or they're doing extra work, extra scope than what we agreed? So different dimensions for different organisations, but at its simplest level, it's about validating, is the project doing the work it said it would do in the business case? And then underneath that, is it running to accepted risk practices? Has it set up the right governance? Has it complied with the governance model for the organisation? So it's defined a lot by what's the rules of the organisation. But typically those are things I'd look at for an assurance process. And then to your question about, sorry, what was the second question?
What kind of intervention can we do if
Oh,
it's not
okay.
yet?
So the interventions are often around the project might need to pause. We might need to bring and do some more work before it's ready to progress on to the next stage. It might be that we've got to go back and do some refreshing of the plan. It might mean that it needs to do extra risk definition work. It might mean that it hasn't got the right resources, so we don't want to change the resource mix in it. Through to kill the project. This project is dead in the water. There's nothing we can do that's properly going to fix it that is feasible and maybe time and cost relevant, in which case we should kill it now and cut our losses.
Is it possible if the stage of the project is already too big to stop?
Oh, I love that one.
Okay,
Is the
so
project
we
too big to
continue
stop?
and we
Yeah.
change the objective, so we try
Yeah,
to look
yeah,
for
yeah.
another justification. Okay, we should do
Yeah. Do you work in government?
this.
Yes. Okay. How did I know that? No. No. Yeah. There is. Look. So the philosophical answer would be there is no project too big to stop. If the project is not delivering value, and it has no chance of delivering value, inclusive of any interventions that you could make, which might include reshaping it, changing its scope, spending more money, taking longer. But if after all that, irrespective of its size, if it can't be rescued or deliver some value, there's no such thing as being too big to stop. Because all you're doing, if it's never going to deliver any value, the best thing, you create value by not wasting more money on it, by stopping it at the right time. Now, in government, of course, there's political considerations. Peel back the layers of the layers of the environment that it operates within. In many, and probably this is equal to in other organisations, by the way, not just government. There is politics. There's organisational, there's political. In government, there's real politics, right? Community politics and oppositional politics, etc. So sometimes we find ourselves, despite our better judgment and despite all the assurance indicators, continuing on to invest in something, even if we know it's never going to really deliver the benefit. The real skill becomes describing how successful the project has been at the end, irrespective, right? So let's not go down that rabbit burrow. For the purposes of today, we should be brave enough to raise the point that if this thing is not going to deliver a value, or it cannot be rescued or improved to deliver some value, then we should be brave enough to say we either need to fundamentally stop this project and kill it, or we need to fundamentally stop it and reshape it, okay, to create something else out of it that's going to be some value. Now, what people then choose to do with you ringing that bell, that's up to them. Someone else has to make that decision, but you should at least flag it. Okay? And it's the hardest thing you could ever do as a project manager. The hardest thing you can ever do is to stop something that is already well on its way, particularly if it's later in the life cycle. Because there's because it's not just data and facts and processes and work in here. There's emotion, there's politics, there's effort and angst, there's pride, there's ego. And that's what makes projects both equal parts fascinating and frustrating. Okay? Because you're dealing as a project manager with all those facets. Good luck with killing your project if you've got a problem.
So it's not common to look for another objective. I mean, which is the objective?
Oh, well, that's part of reshaping it. You've had, oh, we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. I mean, that's politics. You know, we're going to solve this problem, then go, oh, hold on, we're now going to use this solution to do this thing instead. That's Class A politics, that one. Yeah. If you're not doing political science, maybe do it because it'd be a really good double with project management. Alrighty, okay, I'm going to okay. Suddenly a heated exchange took place between the King and the moat contractor. Who's been involved in this project before? What's happening here? What's the problem with this project? What's the fundamental problem with this project? You don't need to be medieval to work it out.
It goes nowhere.
It's not. Well, yeah, it's not finished yet. So but what's the issue? What's the purpose of a moat? Go back to the why.
No point of doing it in that side of the wall.
Because for what reason? You're absolutely right. Why is a moat done on the outside of the castle? What's the purpose of?
Protect the castle.
To keep people out, protect the castle.
It's not even a castle though.
Yeah, well, for the point of illustration. Thank you very much. I mean, take it up with Larson. All right. The fundamental issue of this one, of course, functionally, so they could, this is the differentiation between project success and business success. The project contractor here, the moat contractor, could build a perfectly good moat. But if they're not building it in the right place, it's functionally useless. Does that make sense? It was never going to deliver, this one, even if it's built, is never going, and it's the world's perfect moat, it's never going to deliver. So project success could be high, but the business success will be zero because, as we've ascertained, it's not functionally right. Okay? All right, we've probably all had the odd project like this. What's going on here, though? More importantly, is to ask, what is going on here? What's going wrong with this project? What's happening here that, if I was the project manager coming in, if I was the risk assurance manager, I was coming in, or I was another project manager, I'm coming in, I'm looking at this project, what is going wrong here? What are some of the errors? How much of the moat's been built already? Too much, yeah. Too much because of what reason? What should the, if you think of the King as the project sponsor, what's the project sponsor's role? To monitor and to initiate the project and monitor it. Do you think the King's been monitoring this project when the guy's basically about halfway done? He's come out suddenly. Suddenly a heated exchange took place. The King's been too busy feasting or whatever kings do. Do I know what kings do? I'm not one. And he's come out, oh, I'm just going to go out and have a look at the moat. Oh, see how the moat's going. Oh, hold on a minute, we have a problem. And the moat contractor, what's he not doing here? As a project manager, what's he not doing? He or she, it is a he by the looks of things. What's he not doing in this case? What's he not done?
Reporting or transparency?
Probably not a lot of reporting and transparency of the work being done. Probably didn't check in with requirements up front and clarify the need. Probably didn't really, the King probably also, sponsored, probably didn't really attest. If this guy is a moat contractor and allegedly they're a professional, you'd think he would have the nous to build it on the outside, you would think, wouldn't you? So there's lots of things going on here. Communication's not happening, so on and so forth. You get the picture, right? You understand what's going on with this project. So it hasn't been set up for success. I'm not going to go through all these, other than this is sort of the old, adapted from a couple of different things, from the John Grill Centre for Complex Project Leadership, etc., University of Sydney. Apologies to Melbourne. Sydney Uni got there first in this instance. But also, I've adapted it from, I married it with some work I did at PwC with their project methodology, which had these 7 keys. Well, we've actually got 6 there. Those 6 keys for success in defining a project. So the thinking here is asking yourself these questions. So this, you could then use this as a little bit of a 1-page template for your project, just to tick off as to where I'm in this project today, it's a little bit of like self-assurance check, where I'm at today, are stakeholders committed, are we clear about the scope, is it realistic, so on and so forth. Have we established the right governance structure, tick in the top box. Do we have regular, am I asking, is the assurance reviews happening periodically, tick in the top top right-hand box, so on and so forth. You can ask yourself a bit of a checklist to say, have I done the things, or am I doing the things in here that are setting me up for success. Now, you can do this at the start of the project. You can do it at each stage gate. Even if you don't have stage gates, you can do it every quarter or every 6 months or every time you maybe deliver something substantial, if it's a more iterative, agile type method. But you can use these to a bit of a checklist to say, are we set up for success? And are we ready? And if so, we're then ready to move to the next piece of work. Okay? And these are the fundamental, you go back, you marry some of these to those success factors that we had in the earlier slide. You'll see a lot of commonality between the earlier slide. And again, if I wanted to, I could cut these in little boxes and stick them under headings of why, what, and how. Why, what, how, why, what, how. If that's all you take away today, you can take that away. I'm not going to labour this because I'm going to go into something else in a minute instead. But this is basically, again, you can look at your own joy in terms of putting just a few steps. In the very early stages of mobilising and initiating a project is asking yourself, have I done this work? Okay, and this is just about that first step. So from between identify through to define the next steps, this is simply about getting the thing up and going. I've got the money. I've got past. I'm on the Monopoly board, and I'm on the little home key, and I've now got my money. Do I start go or not? Do I go past go or do I not go past go? That's what this is about here. Now, simply saying, have I done enough work to define the next piece of work? Have I got parties involved? All the things we already talked about, that clarity of scope, enough engagement, clarity of expectations, etc. I'm just going to touch on this briefly because this is one of those little boxes talked about governance. So I'm going into project governance now. What is good governance, and why do we have governance? Can anyone give me a definition of governance? Your own definition of governance. I don't need a textbook one. Why do we do? Well, maybe I'll ask another way. Why governance? Why do we do governance? Some people say it's a horrible word. Why do we do governance?
For clarity on responsibilities and accountabilities.
Perfect. Do you want to cut? I can sit down and have a rest. You can do this section. That's great. I love it. I might even write that down. Might steal that one from you. What are the reasons for governance? What else is governance trying to do? It provides some structure. That's real. You definitely should come and do this section. So it provides some structure. It provides some rules of engagement. Some what I like to call guardrails. Guardrails, which means guardrails provide room to manoeuvre, but they provide the boundaries that to operate within. So you can bounce against them and move between them, but not outside them. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So it's all those things. Is someone else going to say something? Sorry. No? Okay. All right. Cool. So all I've put around here is just the various aspects, again, the sort of key factors that define project success. So stakeholder engagement, accountability, responsibilities like you said, how to communicate, so on, all the sort of project management factors basically. And we execute governance predominantly through a structure, which is also what you said. It provides some structure, and we do that through clarity of roles, responsibilities. So a project control board or a steering committee or whatever you call it in your organisation, which is really about how to communicate and engage with the critical decision makers and stakeholders associated with your project. Because it's about them keeping them informed and engaged and getting direction from them in return. That's essentially what governance is. It then provides you with those guardrails to say, if something's bouncing outside the governance guardrails, then it's probably a good reason to pause, take a look at what's happening and understand what I need to do to address it, because that's probably a warning sign that if we keep hitting the guardrails too much, we might bounce off the edge and wind up in the trenches, so to speak. Were you going to say something, sir?
No.
Okay.
I'm just want to ask. In the major business case condition for the governance, do we need to also establish the workflow? I mean the workflow of decision making, for example.
Well, yes, if it's unique to the project, or if for some reason the organisation doesn't typically articulate what decision flow and decision responsibilities are. So many organisations, part of their project management processes, will have guidance that says what the typical decision flow is. So what accountabilities different parties have and at what level of delegation they can make those decisions. And generally speaking, all projects will be expected to adhere to that. If for some reason your organisation doesn't have that, or you need something unique for the project, well then yes, you would articulate that in the, maybe probably not as much in the business case, but certainly maybe the project charter or the project management plan or some other form of project documentation. You know, you'd articulate that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
But I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go doing it if you're just following what's already the standard in the organisation. Save yourself the grief. Risk management. Okay. Who understands and does risk management as part of their project? Who's familiar with risk management? Do I need to labour this section, or are we all okay? The point of risk management is fundamentally early intervention. So it's not about writing the world's most perfect risk statements and a beautiful risk management plan and then sticking it in the bottom drawer and leaving it there. It's about having it daily as part of the project management checklist. For what reason? Why would I say not just write the most beautiful risk management plan and risk log or register, whatever you call it, then stick it in the bottom drawer? Why do I need to carry it around with me as project manager every day, every meeting, every interaction, every discussion I'm having? Why? Why would I do that? Because I love carrying paper around, right? Or iPad, whatever. Why would I be having that thing dynamically with me all the time as a project manager? Okay, we're getting tired.
In my case, I used to work in a bank, in the IT department, so like risk management was like the heart.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is.
Because especially they can occur,
Yes.
can happen.
Yes, that's right. So
That's
risk
one of the
management
main
is
reasons.
risk management is at the heart of projects, because projects are exercises in defining, controlling, and managing risk. Because projects change stuff, and with change comes risk, right? So that's that's why at the heart of it, okay? But the other reason why they're dynamically carrying this with me all the time is because the project environment is dynamic. It's constantly changing. And even if the project environment isn't, the wider environment, remember the onions? The onion rings? The wider environment which the project is operating is changing. And therefore, the project is constantly, needs to be attuned to evolving risks, either new risks emerging, existing risks changing, so on and so forth. Because if you leave them too long, risks are the most beautiful things. They're a bit like butterflies, okay? Risks, think of the risks as a caterpillar, right? When it's a bit like exactly a caterpillar in reverse, in fact. Risks are a bit like butterflies, and when they blow up or become real, triggered by an event, they become these ugly, hairy, brutish caterpillars. They start eating your apple, or eat all your leaves, or eat all your veggies in the garden, right? They're the opposite. Then they start, there's a beautiful thing that you've articulated to help manage the project, and then you really hope that they never metamorphose into the bug that is really ugly and eats things and is a bit icky, right? Because that's what happens to risks if you don't manage them. They materialise, they eventuate, and then they start eating into the project, okay? So that's why it's really important.
I have a question.
Yep.
So regarding with the risk treatment, what is your opinion? I mean, like, if we are in the construction project, for example, we have a different level of risk. For example, in the technical level of risk, and then in the business level of risk, and also the very high level of risk.
Yep.
Like that. So the risk management usually is in the top level, and they cannot oversee the condition in the technical level. So it's very difficult to know the risk. So do we need to have a different risk management team for each level of risk?
Oh, look, you may, if the project's really huge, yeah, you might have, if you're talking about big governmental pieces changing a huge amount, or any sort of project that's got massive implications and lots of moving parts to it, you might have dedicated risk expertise, at different levels and for different functions of the project or different areas where it's impacting, because having that domain knowledge, technical domain knowledge or operational process domain knowledge or strategic knowledge, will help you get better risk identification than having one person trying to guesstimate it all, right? On the other hand, some projects are much, much smaller, and you might not have a dedicated risk person at all. It's down to the project manager to do this work talking to the stakeholders. So it doesn't really matter, though, whether it's either one of those two circumstances, which is sort of like bookend type circumstances, big, large, hairy, or small, simple. The point is that risk management is a daily thing that needs to be done and it's owned either way by the project manager, and it should be on the discussion at every single project steering committee or control board discussion. So the number one risk that should be in your risk log is we don't talk about risk in the project. Had the control bit is that we don't apply it through our governance process. You know, it's not on the agenda. If it's not there, you're not talking about it, is the reality. Yet it's one of the most important things will come undone. Change control, look, I won't labour this too much. The reality is, having gone through all the effort of striking a plan for how you're going to go about this project and agreeing the scope of work you're going to do that drives X number of deliverables that create the product, that deliver the benefit, that realise the strategy and solve the problem, you know, that conundrum. Having struck all those things, we know, and the effort behind them, we know that only one thing is constant and likely to happen to them, is that they will change. They'll come under pressure. You know, external sources, internal sources, whatever, they'll come under pressure. So therefore, having a governance process that is about monitoring those changes and making deliberate decisions about whether we should accept those changes or not, okay, is what change control is all about. As distinct from change management, so change management is about implementing the changes successfully from project into business unit operations and making sure it sticks and it works, so it's fit for purpose and it works as intended and delivers the benefit. That's change management. Change control under a governance banner is about we're adding something extra to the scope. That's going to cost this much extra money, it's going to take this much extra time on the project, we're going to need some extra people to do it. Does it what's it do to the business case? What's it do to delivering the benefits of the project? Is it a change we should accept? Yes or no? Does that make sense? So putting the right controls over that and what criteria we want to look at, but generally speaking, every organisation, every project might have different criteria to assess those changes against, but they should relate to those 4 things down there in the second last bullet point. They should relate to the impact on scope, time, cost and benefit. Here's the cautionary note. Most organisations will focus on which 2 out of those 4? Cost and time. Thank you, yes. So they rarely think about the bookends of the work we're commissioned to do and the benefit we're supposed to be doing it for. So if anything you take away, when someone says, here's a change control, and it's going to cost an extra $100,000, or it's going to cost no extra money, it's going to take an extra month's worth of work, the first thing I'll ask is, how's it take extra month's worth without costing more money? But anyway, you know what I mean? You can sit there and go, that's great, that makes perfect sense, but can you tell me, what's it do to the scope of work that we're commissioned to do? Does it change the scope of work, or does it clarify the scope of work? Change or clarify? And secondly, as a result of that, what's it do to the benefit? Does it add benefit? Does it protect benefit? Does it erode benefit? Because changes can be taking stuff out, not just putting stuff back in. Okay? All right, sponsorship and the project manager. Okay. When I started working in projects 35 years ago and tried to explain to my family, they had no idea what I really did. They still don't. And my wife's the project manager and she doesn't understand what I do any more than I understand what she does some days. This just helps you if you're not too sure. In real terms, project management, yes, we've talked about processes, we've talked about standards, we've talked about tools, we've talked about formulas, we've talked about different ways of thinking. So projects is therefore, and project management, effective project management, going back to sort of Industry 2 and Industry 1 days, was all about tools and processes. Is the inverse of that pyramid. As we've moved through more modern eras and projects have become less about only heavy industry and construction and about big defence type things or big concrete things, which are still very important, don't get me wrong, projects have morphed into services, heaven forbid, in the government, into charities, into community, into sporting clubs, so they become a much wider base. So it's not just about the tools and about processes. Because as we've also talked about, a lot of what we talked about, I joked about psychology, right? But the reality is, as a project manager, you are juggling all these facets, spinning all the plates at the same time, and keep them all from dropping on the ground. So project management is also about behaviour and politics and presenting and about influencing and shaping and convincing, maybe cajoling, maybe occasionally threatening. It's all those as behavioural, much more than it is about tools and templates. and processes, which are, we sit there and say, in the project toolkit, I expect you to have, as a project professional, all the necessary tools in your toolkit, just like I would have if the plumber is coming out to fix my leaking tap. I would expect the plumber to have all the tools in their toolkit: wrenches, screwdrivers, hammers, saws, whatever they need to do the job. I wouldn't expect them to rock up and go, oh, gee, I've never fixed a leaking tap before, right? No, I haven't got the right tools to do this. I expect them to have that as hygiene. The same should apply to project management professionals these days. So what really differentiates the better performing ones is the top dimension, how they operate and manage people and stakeholders and influence. Which is the reason why you spend more time controlling rather than doing and planning. If you're a project manager, you're spending all your time in on the tools and all your time on templates and all your time refreshing plans and templates and risk logs and all this sort of stuff and never talking to anyone, you are going to be in trouble. Simple as that.
Do you think artificial intelligence is going to change and it's going to be more about planning than control?
Yeah, exactly. So when you talk about, a really good question. When you think about AI and automation, and when you look about, go back before the days of project planning tools, before the days of Excel, we used to do work breakdown structures and we'd do critical path by hand. I doubt any of you have ever done one, and thank God you don't have to. You can get the tool to do it for you these days. The same applies with AI. It's really about helping you, really automate as much as possible and take away some of the crud that goes with it. So then you can apply the behaviour. You can still attest to it and apply the reasonableness test, but then you're applying, how do I apply this, right? It's like when I did a farewell card for someone yesterday. You do those automated cards these days? Dear Joe, you're leaving sort of thing, tick here, put some money in the box and away you go, instead of people running around with a hat in the office. For the first time I noticed on this one, you could use AI to write the note for you. So you put in the person's name, put in your name. What style did you want to write the note in? Was it funny? Was it going to be more friendly? Was it about being professional? And what was it for? Were they going away, leaving? So, and it would then write a note for you. Now I could have just gone then send, and it would have been probably perfectly acceptable. But when I read it, of course, I got, that doesn't quite work for me. That's not right. So I adjusted the note that was there. I probably used about half of what was there. But that saved me probably 10 minutes. So that's how AI, I think, can help. But you still have to apply the reasonableness test over it. Because if I had just sent it the way it was, the other person receiving it would have gone, that doesn't sound like Rob. Doesn't sound like it's come from him. Well, what's he saying that bit for? So does that make sense?
We have 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay, cool. Let me just get to a couple of key points here and then we'll wrap it up. So there's other slides in here that I'm going to refer, that you guys can take in your own leisure. They go a bit further into, one point I was going to talk about was agility. I'm just going to touch on this really quickly. This is about role sponsorship. It's pretty critical, but I think you guys get it already. I just want to touch on agility, because it's usually, go back a step. It's usually something that pops up a lot. I've touched on it already to a degree. And I said at the start, and I very deliberately avoided getting hung up on project delivery methods. And this is for the simple reason that when you think about a toolkit of methods to deliver a project, it doesn't really matter. You can build, you go back to the house analogy, you can build the house using more agile methods if you want to. There's just different implications of how you govern it and potentially some different risks about what might be involved in doing it. Or you can deliver it via traditional waterfall, step-by-step type methods with lots of detailed planning up front as well. Neither one is right or wrong. What is right or wrong is not to have what is wrong is not to have deliberately decided what method or approach will we use, having been eyes wide open about the consequences of using it. So if I'm going to build the house using more agile methods, then as the owner or the sponsor, I need to be more intimately involved all the way through the process and be more available in real time if necessary to make real time decisions. And I need to live with the fact we might be a bit experimental, which means we might have to redo some things. So I need to have contingency up my sleeve. Under a waterfall method, I need to put more effort in up front, and then I can step away a little bit, but I've still got responsibility for checking periodically. I still might need a contingency set aside. So do you understand the difference? That's probably just worthwhile focusing on. So do not get hung up on method. It's about choosing what's the right method for the circumstances, and this gives you a little bit of a model that you could use to test. Given these circumstances, on the left, is it a bit more waterfall, might be more the right method to follow. On the right, maybe more agile methods is a bit the way to go. If I'm not sure, I'd say this. If you're not sure, don't go, I'm going to go hybrid. Right? Make a more deliberate decision to experiment, to understand a little bit more. Genuine hybrid is usually okay, but it's about phases within a larger project. And then the only thing I've got to touch on, we've covered some of this already. This is about the what and how stuff. Same thing, we've covered on this already. I want to talk about closure and handover and success. Again, just marry this back. So this is one here. And the other slides just build to this, and they just reinforce it, so you're not missing much. So having done all the work we've done, we've taken our bag of money to answer the question, we've done the work, we've done some planning around the work, we've governance around the planning, governance around the execution, we've managed risks, we've done a lot, we've delivered it. Have we? Have we? So the fundamental measure I said at the start about project delivery success is that top half. We delivered the scope, we delivered the outcomes we said we're going to deliver, so the scope of work that's created the outcomes we said. We did it within time and cost, or we've adjusted those along the way, but whatever, we did it within the acceptable aspects of time and cost. The most critical then measures, the business measures of success, because that's the reason why we did it in the first place, are these other concepts of, are the outcomes fit for purpose? So I didn't just deliver the outcome and I walked away from it. I'm asking, did it work? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? Is it having the impact or the effect that it was supposed to do? So to help with that, there should be some measures, typically operational measures, that describe how the outcome should work, how it should operate, what it should do. Is it faster? Is it more robust? Does it do things with less error? What's the operational metrics of success? And as a consequence of that, what business benefits are being realised? Now, I've described here some that are more sort of financial or more sort of metrics driven. That could equally be the customers are happier, the community is more satisfied, less turnover of staff, less attrition, those sort of things, less down days, whatever the case may be, okay? But those two sets of measures, alongside the traditional of we delivered to scope, time and cost, or whatever was the acceptable adjustments to those, together take us back to the very start of delivery success plus business success, together equaling project success. That's the fundamental test you should be applying at the end of the project, but having measured it on the way through. With that in mind, I'm just going to end there. Wish you all the best with all your projects. I hope they all come to pass successfully. There are some other slides in the thing, depending on where we're going to go with the conversation. I'm going to talk a little bit around EPMOs, talk a little bit around some depth behind a few of these concepts I've just raised, and there's hopefully fair little diagrams in that you can help stick in your toolkit, maybe use over time if you want, like the Agile one. But we don't need to have laboured them. I'm hoping you've got something from that, and it's all been useful to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for that. Thank you. Beautiful. We sadly run out of time,
That's
so
all right.
maybe I will first, this is to me, I should have warned you, we normally have here sharpened over quarter past.
Yep.
So we carry on the conversation in the tutorial with Omar, and if you have any other questions, raise them in your form, and we facilitate a little bit the discussion with Rob, maybe via
More than happy
discussion
to.
forum.
More than happy to.
But thank you very much again, Rob. This
Pleasure.
was wonderful. Yeah.
Good luck.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks for all the good questions.
It's very great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is that all right?
So,
Finally, I get this attendance.
Do you use some of the contact then?
So, oh yeah. I need.